Hey everybody, KC here. So I have a couple of quick comments this morning on two stories that have been in the news and that came up last week on Morning Newsbeat. The first one has to do with the decision by Meta to no longer do any fact checking on its social media sites, including Facebook. And instead, they're going to defer to what they're calling community notes to point out mischaracterizations, misinformation, disinformation, inaccuracies, the whole thing. So CEO Mark Zuckerberg sort of characterized this as being pro-free speech, but I think that's a crock. Content moderation, fact-checking are not censorship. They're just content moderation and fact-checking. I think social media sites actually have an ethical responsibility to make sure that the stuff they're putting out there is not inaccurate. But of course, they're under no legal obligation, apparently, to do that. And tech oligarchs have very little understanding of what the word ethical means. So I don't think they're really worried about the fact that, that they're being challenged on this particular front by people like me. But I would suggest that you should be worried about this, because the fact of the matter is, if they're not doing any content moderation and they're not doing any fact checking, that means that anybody could go out there and they could fire broadsides at you and your companies on social media. And they could accuse you of anything they want to accuse you of, whether there are facts to go along with it or not. And you're going to have to depend on the community, whatever the hell the community means, to set things right. And that's not necessarily going to happen because the community, well, they don't know necessarily what the facts are. They may not care what the facts are. They have no stake in your reputation. I think this is something that businesses, and especially retailers, and especially, quite frankly, supermarkets ought to think about. It's important to maintain trust, and it's going to be so easy for anybody on these social media sites, for whatever reason they want to subvert and undermine that trust. You should be really worried about this. The other thing I wanted to talk about a little bit was the Los Angeles fires, which are just so sad. They're so tragic and, quite frankly, almost incomprehensible. Now, there are a lot of accusations being thrown about right now about why these things happened. It strikes me as both typical and sort of irresponsible that people are doing this. Maybe we could actually wait until the fires are out, and B, some investigations are done before we start making these big pronouncements about who, what, when, where, and why. I think a lot of reporting is going to be done. A lot of investigation is going to be done, but I think it's irresponsible for people or institutions to be throwing around a lot of blame at this point. But that's not really what I want to talk about. I was listening to a podcast from Puck over the weekend, which was interesting because one of the things they talked about was how in this sort of fast evolving news story, a time of terrible tragedy, so many people found that the best place for them to get their information, to get guidance, was not from social media. It was from local news. The reporters and the photographers and the videographers in LA apparently have done and continue to do amazing work reporting on the fires, explaining the impact on communities, offering guidance, and putting it all in context as much as they could. And the point on the podcast was, I thought this was really smart, it was the localness of these news broadcasts that really set them apart. They could understand what was happening and could report on it in a way that national news organizations and certainly social media sites simply couldn't or wouldn't, though for different reasons. Their localness made them a trusted resource, central to the lives of both the people who they were covering and the people who were watching them. And it seemed to me, in a lot of ways, that this is what a great retail store, especially a great supermarket, does. In ways that behemoths simply cannot, local stores can connect the dots, serve as both source and resource, and be core to the lives, the needs, and the wants of their customers. The late Speaker of the House, Tip O'Neill, used to say that all politics is local. Well, I think all news is local, at least in terms of how people think of it, in terms of news's impact on their lives. And I think the best retailers are local, not just in terms of geography, but in terms of how they're able to suss out and respond to what their communities want and need. Anyway, that's what's on my mind. And as always, I want to hear what's on your mind.